Hi, I'm Sheila Siegel. I'm the owner and broker of California Property Group here in Santa Barbara. We're a residential real estate brokerage representing both buyers and sellers. And I've been involved in REOs for a little bit over 21 years now, both as an investor and also representing buyers and successfully purchasing these type of properties. I'm the listing broker for Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD, for Santa Barbara County, and I list for various asset management companies. So today we're going to be talking about bank-owned properties, HUD homes, and fixers. The first category, bank-owned properties and HUD homes, are what is known as REOs, and that's an acronym for when a bank has these assets, real estate assets, and it stands for real estate owned. That's what an REO is. So how does a property become an REO? Well, first of all, these are foreclosed properties. These are properties where the previous homeowner stopped making their mortgage payment, and it's usually over quite a bit of time. I've seen some people go for as long as 3 years before they're foreclosed upon. Perhaps they couldn't get their loan modification, so they've lost the home via foreclosure. That property goes back to the bank. That's the first step. There's certain types of loans that take it a step further. So if a loan was an FHA loan, which is just a government-backed loan, it's insured by Housing and Urban Development, the bank has the option to call that insurance policy due. They don't want the asset anymore, they don't want to deal with the property. It reverts to Housing and Urban Development, and that's what it becomes what's called a HUD home. Now, HUD homes don't have anything to do with where a property is located, with the home value, with buyer's income. Housing and Urban Development represents many different programs. Maybe you've heard of Section 8, maybe you've heard of other programs, but HUD homes only have to do with the fact that that property that was foreclosed upon had an FHA loan in it. So to give you an example, a few of my listings just this year, one was a condo over on Modoc, a really nice property. Another was a house in Solvang. I just represented a buyer where we successfully got his bid accepted on a $740,000 condo in Studio City. That was a HUD home. So HUD homes are all over the place. It's just a different way to buy property. It is an REO, just like a bank-owned property is. Not all agents are approved to be able to sell. I'm the only listing broker in the county, but any agency, any real estate agency can sign up for free to sell HUD properties. So if you're interested in those kind of properties, or you're going to be looking at one, ask your agent if they are approved to be able to sell HUD homes. So what are the benefits of buying an REO property? Well, I think a lot of people can kind of figure that one out. Sweat equity. So you're buying a property, oftentimes that is a fixer-upper. When people are losing their homes, the last thing that they're thinking about is really keeping that home up. I mean, they just can't afford to do so. Although I've had some properties that I've taken back where the owners actually will hand me the keys and the properties are broom swept, but that's not the norm. So if you are open to looking at fixer-uppers, and that's what REOs often are, you can vastly open up the inventory that's available to you. Not all owner-occupants want to buy fixer-uppers, so that will give you an advantage. A lot of people who are going to live in a property figure, I don't have the time, I don't want to deal with it, I want to buy something that's ready to go. And if you've been looking at all, you know, those ones go fast. Those, you're paying top dollar for those. So if you're open to earning some sweat equity, buying an REO is a great way to go. But what are the pitfalls of buying an REO? Well, the other thing that you may have heard is investors buy all these REOs. That's not necessarily the case. Investors often bid on REOs because they think they can buy them very cheaply. They will often have cash. They will often, or be able to get what's called a private money loan, which is a higher interest rate loan. And those loans can close pretty quickly. But if you keep in mind that an investor is buying a property because they want to flip it, they want to buy it and they want to resell it, or they want to buy it, fix it, and rent it, what are they doing? They're buying that property as cheaply as they can. I just had one, it was a US bank property in Carp, just closed, and we got 2 offers. One was a cash buyer, 21-day close, $590,000. The list price on this house was $660,000, which in Carp is right now is a very good price. Owner-occupant came in at $650,000. That person was financed, but because of the way that they wrote the offer, the bank accepted it and opted to take that over an investor. So keep in mind when you're looking at these properties, don't get scared off because you think, oh, I'm not going to get it because an investor is bidding. That's not the reason you're not going to get it. There are other reasons, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, is how do you compete against investors? And I've gotten offers in where people put standard financing on a property that does not qualify for regular financing. And you may have the best bid in the world, but if your agent doesn't get that, I've got a house, it's a fixer-upper, can't do regular financing, but I want to be competitive, what do? I have a listing right now in Solvang, and it needs a new roof. And that's been disclosed to buyers, so it either needs to be cash, or it needs to be a construction loan. Well, anyone can get a construction loan. You don't have to be an investor to do that. You can get a rehab loan. But when I've had agents call me to submit an offer on one of my properties that is really going to be a financing issue with standard financing, as a listing broker for these REOs, I have input with the asset manager to tell them that, look, looks like a great offer on its face, but we've got a roof problem here, and I'm the eyes and ears for the bank here. These asset managers are in different areas of the country. So I will tell them that the problem we're going to have is this person's trying to get financing with 5% down, and we know that's not going to fly. And my background, by the way, is I have 23 years as an owner of a mortgage company in Santa Barbara, First Fidelity Mortgage. So that's not my business anymore, but because of that, I'm very tuned into financing and the programs that are available, what can and cannot be financed. So a couple of the pitfalls is that you are bidding against investors who typically will bid low, but their terms might be better. So when a bank's looking at a property, it's not always the highest offer that's going to win. So the other pitfall, before I get into, so how do you structure your offer so that you can win against investors or be competitive? I just want to go over what is probably the biggest pitfall of buying an REO, because people think these are great. I want to get into this.
REO?
REO is real estate owned.
Oh.
When a bank or HUD owns a property that they've taken back in foreclosure, it's they call it an asset, but they also call it a real estate owned or REO. So that's the term that you hear for any kind of a bank-owned property or HUD property, is they're called REOs. But the biggest pitfall on REOs is the sellers are exempt from what's called a TDS or a transfer disclosure. So what is that, and what does that mean? Why is that a big deal? Because it's a huge deal. The bank or HUD has never lived in this property. If you're buying a house, if I'm selling you a house, I know what's wrong with my house. I am legally required to give the buyer a transfer disclosure that tells them everything that's wrong with the property. A bank's never lived in the property. Neither is HUD. They don't know what's wrong with that property. And some people get very angry when they have lost their home in foreclosure. I, as an investor, purchased a house years ago where the seller got so angry, they took everything out of the house, including the furnace, the water heater, the kitchen cabinets, and threw them in the swimming pool. And you don't know, has that person poured concrete down the toilets? You don't know. So something that looks good in its face, you absolutely have to get an inspection for. So if you just go in understanding that I'm not going to know what's wrong with this property, and I'll even have other agents ask me, well, do you know how old the roof is? Do you know about the plumbing? I don't know anything. I'm the listing broker for a bank that's never lived in this property, so it is buyer beware. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because you will always do, and you should always do, an inspection on your properties. And inspections are critical on any kind of a bank-owned property or a HUD home, because there is no history on the property. It'll tell you, an inspector will be able to tell you what's wrong with that property. And if an inspector recommends that you get further inspections, then I would definitely move forward with doing that. The difference when you're buying a REO property and you have an inspection, you cannot turn around to the bank and say, well, I want a credit for this, I want you to fix that. Banks don't do that. Banks don't renegotiate. It may be that you make an offer. That's what contingencies are for inspections, is it gives you a certain amount of time to be able to do your due diligence, go in, check the home out, and if you don't want it, with bank-owned properties, you just walk away, or you say, okay, I know what I'm getting into, I'm going to move forward. As opposed to a regular sale between a buyer and seller. If I was selling to you, and you said, you know what, this wasn't on the disclosure, but I see that there's I had one situation with a buyer, he did an inspection on a lateral line, which is the sewer line that goes from the house to the street, and it was broken. And the seller didn't disclose that. I'd like to think the seller didn't know that, but we found that out through our inspections. And because it was a regular sale, I was able to go back to the seller and say, hey, we want this much of a credit, or you have to fix it. You can't do that on REOs. So just going in, the pitfalls, so again, the pitfalls are that there's no disclosures. The only disclosure you would get would be from the agent who does a visual inspection. I'll walk through and I'll say, I see termite damage there, or I see roof damage, or like the one in Solvang, it was very obvious there were water stains on the inside of the house, so I just put tarps on the roof, and because that indicates that there's a roof issue. And as an agent, when I see something like that, that's something that I disclose, but the agent is not going to be responsible for telling you what's wrong with the property. That's where the inspection comes in. And when you do an inspection, shadow the inspector. I've had agents on my listings do the inspection for their buyers, which I would never do. I always make the buyer meet the inspector and shadow that inspector through the house. You want to know how the systems work. You want to see what's wrong. You don't want pictures on the report where the inspector goes, oh, we've got this, this, and this. You're paying for the inspection. It's really important that you shadow the inspector. If you're buying as an owner-occupant, you're getting regular financing. So how do you compete against investors who are paying cash or are getting a private money loan and they can close quickly? First of all, since there's different types of REOs, there's HUD homes, there's VA homes, there's REO, there's bank-owned properties. Ask the agent if they can determine from looking at the listing or calling the listing broker, is there an owner occupancy period? In the past, when I've listed properties for Fannie Mae, they've had an owner occupancy period where only owner occupants can bid. That's all changed with Fannie Mae. But HUD, Housing and Urban Development, has a 10-day exclusive owner occupancy period. So what that means is, like, I have a HUD condo that came on the market yesterday. For the next 10 days, only owner occupants can bid on that property. So if it's a HUD home, and you would ask your agent, is there an exclusive bidding period for owner occupants? You know, if you're bidding on a HUD home, you're not bidding against investors, but you're bidding against other owner occupants. So how do you win a bid if you're trying to buy a HUD REO? Well, HUD is a little unique. They strictly go by the highest net bid. So let's say that this condo in Lompoc, it's $100,000. And HUD will let you ask for 3% in closing costs, but you keep in mind that they're going to take the highest acceptable net bid. As opposed to other bank properties that might look at terms, HUD is different. They only take the highest acceptable net bid. So if I'm coming in with $100,000 and I ask for 3% closing costs, and I'm getting financed, and someone else comes in and they're paying cash for $99,000 and they don't ask for any closing costs, that cash buyer is going to win, not because they're cash, but because it's the highest net bid. So if you're working with an agent and you're looking at REO properties, have them do some investigation. What is the bank looking for as far as when they're looking for the bid that they're going to accept? And I know if I have agents call me, they're welcome to pick my brain on any of my listings. And also you ask them, is there an exclusive owner occupancy period? Because that's important, because otherwise you're just bidding against everyone. But again, you could, as an owner occupant, be bidding very low on these properties. But typically owner occupants will bid higher than investors because the reason they're buying is different. They're buying to live in a home versus an investor. Yeah.
Okay, that's what it means, that I'm buying the home to live in it versus somebody's buying it to flip it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's usually where owner occupants will be able to win because their bids are going to be higher, because we know that investors will buy low because they're trying to flip or they're renting. And if you're looking at, okay, well, how do I make this the best bid that I can make? An investor is going to come in, and typically when I'm working with investors, I will tell them you want the shortest close period, which means 21 days. Well, if you're getting financing, you can't really compete against that because your loan's going to take 30 days. So what do? You can still compete on these things, and you can be very competitive. The biggest hotspot on bank-owned properties are inspections. When you do an inspection, the contract for your offer defaults to 17 days. Well, you can get an inspection done in 3 to 5 days. And you should, if you're bidding on a bank-owned property, you put that in your contract that I am doing 7 days for an inspection. You are going to pop out at me as the listing broker and also the asset manager. The mistake I see people making when they bid on my bank-owned properties is they'll leave the 17 days, they'll ask for the moon, they'll ask for closing costs, they'll ask for the seller who's the bank to pay for reports, they'll ask for a home warranty. Try to stay competitive with as little inventory as there is, and REOs typically are less expensive. Maybe your agent will pay for a home warranty, that's $400. Don't lose a bid because you're going in and asking for all of these things. But one of the biggest issues on why people lose out who are owner occupants getting financing is because of the financing. And not because it's finance, but it's because the type of finance you're qualified for may not work on that property. So if someone wanted to make an offer on my Solvang property that has a bad roof and they come in with a regular loan, it's not going to be looked at. So instead, if you're looking at an REO, and again, a lot of these are fixers, talk to your lender about a rehab loan or a construction loan. So you're going to go in and you're going to say, not 17 days, I'm going to do a 30-day escrow because I can close this in 30 days. I'm going to do no more than 7 days on inspections. I had someone just write an offer of a REO in Camarillo. I list all over the place. And he came in and said 3 days for inspections. I thought, this guy knows how to write an offer. Very good, because that's what gets the attention. I mean, if you're just asking for the moon, you're going to tie this property up for weeks, bank's not going to be interested. So keep in mind that tightening your contingencies, which is your inspection period, keeping your close of escrow no more than 30 days, and having the right type of financing. Because even if you're financed, if your offer makes sense, and you're not shooting them a ridiculous number, because I have had some people, I had one property up in Vandenberg Village, it was a VA, that we got 8 offers on. And people were so seriously overbidding the property thinking, well, if it's like a regular transaction and it doesn't appraise, the bank will come back and renegotiate. They don't do that. So you don't overbid the property to the extent to where it's ridiculous, but another way to get your offer accepted is to slightly overbid the property. I've had people win bids on my HUD listings by a few $1,000s, sometimes by a few $100s. After being involved in HUD Homes for 21 years, I know how to write up an offer so someone will hopefully be the highest net. And I counsel them that, you don't take closing costs, you maybe bump it up a little bit, whatever extra cash you can come in with, because I can tell you, other people aren't thinking of that. If the condo's $100,000 a Lampo, I'll get a bunch of offers at $100,000. People don't think that way, but you're here now, so I'm telling you, when you get into a situation like that, ask as little as you can on a bank-owned property. So again, just to recap on REOs, tightening any contingencies that you have, not losing out on financing because you have the wrong financing, and also not asking for closing costs and keeping things as brief as possible. And you will win against investors if you have the right type of financing and you're not asking for the moon. So I want to move on to fixer-uppers because I don't have a lot of time here. What are fixer-uppers? Fixer-uppers mean different things to different people. I had a buyer referred to me last year by a local lender I deal with, and he said, this person wants to start flipping properties. Now, I flip properties. I told you about the one that had everything thrown into the pool, and I've had fixer-uppers I've purchased over the years that were just paint and carpet. And I took this gentleman to a house, and it hadn't been lived in 9 years. So if you can imagine, and there were just piles and piles of stuff, and this house was really rough looking. Structurally it was okay, but it was really rough looking, and he went in and said, this house is going to take $500,000 to fix. So if you're going to get into fixer-uppers, the best thing you could do for yourself is learn basic costs. Your idea of a fixer-upper might be paint and carpet. Your idea might be a bathroom and kitchen remodel. What are those costs going to be? Go to any place that sells carpet, flooring, paint. Those are the most basic things, so you know what those costs are. You don't want to get into a property and find out you've taken on a nightmare. You also don't want to lose out on a property because, like this guy, He easily could have bought this property. He was cash, he could have bought the property, but in his mind, it was gonna cost $500,000 to fix the property up. And you don't wanna rely on your agent. I would not rely on your real estate agent to give you those costs, because I don't know how you wanna fix up a property. My idea of a fix-up might be different than yours. So those are costs that you wanna get a handle on. You could probably even Google on the internet. Carpet is X a square foot, so when you go in, what I used to do is I would run around with my pad. I'd say windows for the house, $5,000, carpet. Used to be able to do all of that. But you know, if you're just starting out and looking at a fixer-upper, because it's a great way to give yourself more inventory to look at, become familiar with costs. Also, who's going to do the work on the property? Is it you? Is it going to be someone else? There's a lot of satisfaction in doing work on a property yourself. But that house that you got a great deal on, that had peeling paint and had plumbing issues, if you're sitting there a year later and you're still looking at peeling paint and the toilet's still not working, you're not going to be happy. So when you're looking at a fixer-upper, think about, am I going to do the work? What's my time frame like? What skills do I have? Am I willing to learn some things? Fixers can run all over the map. It can be paint and carpet, it can be a fire damaged property, it can be a termite damaged property, it can be a property that's got a broken slab. Personally, whenever I invested in property, I didn't deal with structural issues, but you might have a cousin who has a concrete business and you can get a foundation done really cheaply, and that's something that maybe you'd be willing to take it on. But you want to know your costs going into it. Your inspection is always going to be an out on any property, so never waive your right to an inspection, because that will give you an out. I had someone just make an offer, and we're in escrow now, on a great property in Montecito, and he wanted this property so badly, he said, no inspection, waive the inspection. And I, wouldn't do it. And inspections are critical. And in this case, the house looked good, had some zoning violations, so it's a fixer. But what we found out with the inspection is that the wall in the garage is crumbling, and that wall supports a studio above it. So I went back and renegotiated with the seller. My buyer's very happy with me, but that's the reason you want an inspection. And is he happy that I forced him to get an inspection? You bet. So, I'm going to open it up now for questions, and I see I've got a hand back there.
In this disclosure issue, would you also, as the listing broker, find out if there's like any zoning violations, like let's say somebody put like an illegal conversion, like a garage conversion? Would you do that, or?
Actually, that's a good question. In the city of Santa Barbara and the city of Carpinteria, it's required to have a zoning inspection. Those are paid for by the bank. However, they don't do the repairs.
No,
So
I mean, just like you may look at something and think, hey, this looks great. And this fourth bedroom, which was formerly a garage, was illegally converted. I mean, would you, in the process of going through that?
So the listing broker does not go out and look for what issues there were with the house. However, if it is in Santa Barbara or in Carp, the city requires that there's a zoning report. They don't do that in Goleta. And there's all kinds of funky places in Goleta that have got conversions and add-ons. And if you suspect that's an issue, you can check permits online. Just Google Santa Barbara County building permits, and it can tell you what's permitted and what's not. Because if you get into getting a loan and the lender says, or the appraiser says, this is an illegal garage conversion, you're likely going to have an issue with financing. But then if you go back to, well, can I flip this to a construction loan or a rehab loan, you can still save your purchase, and then you go in after close and you fix whatever the zoning violations were.
What happens if I do the purchase of closing and then later down the road it happens to be that either the bank or there was an actual zoning issue? What happens in that case?
Well, again, if it's in the city of Santa Barbara or in Carpinteria, they're overly thorough. Likely they'll bring things out that weren't even known to be zoning violations. If you find out something's a zoning violation after close of escrow, you've already signed off that I've done a final walkthrough on the property, I'm okay with everything on the property, so you basically waived your rights once escrow closes, if something is found further down the line. Yes?
When the bank owned property, if price.
I do what's called a broker price opinion. So I look at comparable sales, I look at the condition of the property, I make a recommendation to the bank. The bank will also get an appraisal if it's, and then they'll weigh the two, and they come up with the price between the two of those. So I've got a huge amount of input on the pricing. On HUD properties, they go one step further and they do what's called an AVM, which is an automated value model. And they just run things online. So in addition to my broker price opinion and the appraisal, there's a third way of establishing the value. It's a little crazy making on HUD Homes because it's an ongoing thing I have with them that I come in with a price that's almost always lower than what they have. But they did go with my price on this condo in Lompoc because what's happened is they were overpricing properties and then they wouldn't sell until it came down to about where I had valued it at. So, and I don't know if that's just the bank testing the water to see if they can get a higher offer, or maybe they got a weird appraisal, or
If someone was upside down or the loan was 700,000 and now it's only worth 500,000, are they going to let it sit or are they going to price it at 5?
well, what happens with those is if someone's still living in the property, you mean?
No,
Oh, okay, it's already got it. No, they price it for what it's worth. The price on properties has nothing to do on REOs with what they took it back for. And it's pretty interesting because I'll see, we're selling this house now, a house in Santa Maria for 300, and the loan on it was over 500. So the bank's really taking a bath on some of these.
And that's no different than a short sale.
Yeah, a short sale is when an owner still lives in the property. They are not out of the house yet, and they owe more than what the property is worth. And instead of them having a foreclosure, because foreclosures are terrible for your credit, you never want to have a foreclosure. Short selling your property is a much better way to go because you can preserve your credit. But with short sales, the person is not out of the property. The price with the bank is moving. It's not necessarily the list price. On REOs, the price that's the list price is the list price. That is not the case on short sales. I saw another hand.
Yeah, to engage with you on bank-owned home or properties that you're representing, do we go through an agent? Do we contact you directly?
You can, if you don't currently have what's called a buyer-broker agreement with an agent, you're welcome to talk to me, and I represent a lot of buyers.
Yeah.
And because I come from the other end of it, I'm very knowledgeable about what gets accepted, what can be negotiated. And I've got folders in the back of the room that I've got information about myself and my business card, so you can email me or give me a call.
Now, besides asking an agent or like yourself, is there a website or is there anywhere, how do you know where all these HUD homes are and
It's called HUDHomestore.com. That is the only website. There's all these other scam websites, but HUDHomestore.com is the website that lists HUD homes all over the country. You can buy homes anywhere. And when as a former investor, and by the way, I can't buy HUD homes anymore because whoever I list for makes me sign a contract saying you can no longer buy these properties. But I bought a lot of HUD homes in the past, and I bought them all over the state. So on HUD Home Store, you can look at properties in other areas. It doesn't have to be Santa Barbara or even Santa Barbara County.
That was HUDhomes.com.
It's HUD Home Store. Actually, I'm going to write it down. HUDHomestore.com. Yeah.
Do you do REOs and short sales?
I actually do. I do. I have a few designations. One is a CDPE. There's not a lot of those in Santa Barbara, and that's a Certified Distressed Property Expert. And I got that because I've been working with Bank of America on their REOs, and they were looking for short sale agents, and they said you have to have that designation in order to do short sales, because an agent who does not know what they're doing in short sales, it can be a 9-month fiasco. My short sales take about 45 to 60 days. You have to understand they're a totally different animal. Short sales have to have a real estate agent or broker involved. So some other hands up. Anyone else?
What does that mean, HUD?
HUD is Housing and Urban Development. They're a government agency that oversees a lot of different programs. They oversee the FHA loan program, and when those become foreclosures, they oversee the HUD program. They oversee Section 8. They oversee a lot of federal programs, but HUD
Okay,
is a
that's only
federal
the
agency.
qualifying part, right?
It's what?
It's only the qualifying piece of.
Well, FHA is a loan. It's a loan that you can qualify for, but HUD has to do with the government agency that oversees all the programs, whether it's selling their assets that are called HUD homes, or it's insuring FHA loans, or it's helping people Section 8, or it's building new apartment buildings for low income. They run all over the place, but HUD homes don't have anything to do with the property itself qualifying because of area or price or buyer income. Anyone can buy a HUD home.
And bank owned is like it's a separate thing.
Bank owned would be, that's what they all are initially. So like one of my bigger clients is US Bank. US Bank takes a loan back or takes a property back in foreclosure. It's bank owned. But if it had an FHA loan in it that had insurance, just like if you got in a car accident, you turn to HUD and say, I'm cashing in my insurance policy, here you go, I'm giving you back the house. And that's what they do. Yeah.
Will the VA be listed under that HUD homes, VA loans be listed under that?
No, I don't know the website offhand for VA. I don't know that. Yeah, they don't have a lot of assets. I think over the last 2 years, I list for VA. I've had one in Lompoc and one down in Oxnard. So you don't see a lot of those. Yeah.
What's the stock market of HUD homes in Santa Barbara County? Well, actually not Santa Barbara County, that's Santa Barbara.
It varies. It really varies. Right now, the only HUD listings I've got are this new one in Lompoc and one in Orchid, which is an old town. But there are times that I'll have 7 or 8 of them at a time. They are usually not in Santa Barbara. I had a condo a couple of years ago that was in Santa Barbara, the one in Modoc, most recently one in Solvang, but they tend to be North County. So Lompoc, Santa Maria, Orchid, San Ynez Valley, that area. So you don't see them very often here. But again, if you're open to commuting, and that's an option for you, then HUD Homes is a good way to give yourself some extra inventory to look at. Any other questions?
The bank-owned homes, are those like, how are they different from just a regular listing?
Because they're owned by the bank and not a person. So when a person owns a house, like I'm going to sell my house, I'm going to disclose everything to you, I'm going to negotiate with you the entire way through, because that's part of the transaction, is you're going back and sometimes having to renegotiate. When a bank owns the property, it's not owned by a person, it's now owned by the bank. So if Wells Fargo takes a property back, Wells Fargo owns it, it's no longer owned by that person.
I see them sometimes in the listings, but they start like very low in very good areas, but it's like kind of like questionable. Are we able to put a bid on that because of the competition?
Yes, yes. Yeah, and you want to talk to your real estate agent, see if they've got knowledge and how to make offers on REO properties, how to be competitive, because like I was saying, to be competitive, you're going to make sure your financing's right, you're probably going to be, as an owner occupant, bidding pretty close to what they're asking, if not over, and you're not going to be asking for a lot of things. So that will make you very competitive with an investor if the bank sees that, you know what, this financing will work, because I have a pet peeve. There's some REOs that get listed in Santa Barbara that say cash only. And I'll call the agent and say, why?
Yeah.
Why? Because we want cash. Well, there's no reason for it. It's an agent that just, it's easier to deal with cash. But you could go in with a full price bid or close to it with the right type of financing and get that property. So if they're saying it's just cash and you say, you know what, I'm going in with a construction loan, why would you not take that? And you really have to press the listing agent as to why. Because unless the house is, I had an investor looking at a fire damage property in Lompoc. That might have been beyond a construction loan. That's, you're working, it was a mess up there. So something like that, you might not even want to bid on, because that's a pretty extensive property to buy.
Older homes where perhaps there were some, building regulations that weren't in force at the time something was built, the inspectors in Santa Barbara and
It's grandfathered in.
Yes.
Yeah. So if it's grandfathered in, sometimes you have to go to bat. I had a listing on the Lower West Side, and these poor people have owned this home forever, and the inspector came out and said, well, this water heater's illegal, your house is encroaching on the neighbor. I said, this is all grandfathered in. So we really had to take the city to task as far as getting that zoning report cleaned up, because some of those should never have showed up on a zoning report, because they're grandfathered in. Any other questions?
So the zoning report shouldn't show up grandfather things? Is that what you're saying?
No, if something was grandfathered in, something was okay back in the 60s when it was built,
Right.
I would take the city to task about calling it out now, because if it's something that was permitted and okay back in the 60s,
Yeah.
it's grandfathered in. It should always be grandfathered in, but that doesn't mean they don't call it out. It's very frustrating when it happens, because we had to do double duty. I had to go and I had to get plans from the city to show, no, this is what the house looked like, because the city was insistent that, no, you have to fix this. You have to move your water heater, you've got to move your fence. So I had to pull plans along with the seller, the original plans, or the plans from when this house was rebuilt, to show that it had been grandfathered in years ago.
So now the seller, if the seller doesn't want to do all those things, the buyer could get a construction or rehab them? Is that?
You can, and you can buy it that way and then do the work after close of escrow. But if you know that something's been grandfathered in, I'd call the city on it and say, look, the seller says it's grandfathered in. Anyone can go and look at a copy of plans for a house. You go down to the building department. And so it's something that shouldn't be fixed if it's grandfathered in. You may want to fix it, but it shouldn't have to be fixed as part of the sale because it's grandfathered in. Yes.
Are taxes higher for, I guess, for your mortgage or whatever on a fixer than something that really isn't?
No. No, your taxes are based on the purchase price of the property.
Taxes, but insurance?
Insurance has more to do with where the house is located. If you're in a high fire risk zone or a brush zone or there's a flood zone, that dictates how much your insurance costs. It doesn't have to do with it being a fixer.
Are there is there a good, I know there's a limited inventory in Santa Barbara, but bank-owned in this city?
There's always bank-owned properties in the area. Yes. Yeah, I just had a house close in Carpinteria. I just had a condo close in Carpinteria. But you need to move on them quickly because there's not as many as there used to be, but they're still there. I've always got 3, 4, 5 bank-owned properties or REOs. So they
What
are
will be the, not the average, but what will be the price of like single home?
a single home.
Family home?
Well, like the condo in Carp just sold for $315. It was a 2-bedroom condo in Casitas Village. The house in Carp sold for $650. They were asking $660. And if prices in Carp, homes are starting well over $700,000 out there. And this buyer was willing to put in sweat equity so they could buy something. Their mortgage payment is less, and they were willing to do the work on it. So, in answer to your question, it would be hard to give you an average because you can have homes that are millions of dollars that are REOs. You can have Casitas Village, which is very entry level at $315. So they're just like any other real estate. No one has been exempt from losing their home during what's happened since 2008. So there's very expensive homes, there's very inexpensive homes. It just depends. You just look at whatever you're pre-qualified for.
Now, as real estate agents or companies, do you guys get pre-see all these bank-owned properties prior to the public?
Do I do what?
The real estate agents get to see these bank-owned properties prior to going to the public?
No, they go on the market when an asset manager says put the property. Now, when they say put the property in the market, it has to go into multiple listing. It has to. So it's open to all agents, and the best place to look for properties is always Realtor.com. because Zillow is never accurate. Zillow has pending sales, closed sales. The best place and the direct feeds from MLS are in Realtor.com. So that's always the best place to look at those. Now, when I have a property that is a bank-owned property, you don't, I'm not given the listing and then 2 days later it's listed. There is a whole process to it. Usually when I'm listing an REO, I know about it for several weeks. And at that point, if you're one of my buyers, I will call you and say, heads up, this property's coming on the market. This is what I valued it at. That doesn't mean that's what the bank's going to value it at, but just a heads up. So if you want to bid on it, let me know, and I will usually get them into it. But I don't open that up to other agents. That's just something that I do if I'm working with people I know are interested in those kind of properties. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I appreciate your time. Take one of my folders in the back, and if you have any questions on buying any of these properties, give me a call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, what?